Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary C. Rivero Coker, and this fire safety training for emergency procedures for schools is being conducted today by myself according to application 4 of the Organizational Training and Development Program Master's class for the Industrial Organizational Master's Program for Carlos Albizu University on November 26, 2020. I will be your trainer today, and we're going to discuss and get educated on fire safety. This second slide of the presentation today focuses on what our priorities are. Your safety is our priority. The Office of Fire, Health and Environmental Safety develops and coordinates all hazard emergency management programs. It also ensures business continuity and disaster recovery plans. We annually review and approve site-specific safe school plans. We conduct and facilitate standardized fire safety and emergency and disaster training programs, of which this training today is part of the fire safety and emergency training. We maintain situational awareness of potential threats and developing response plans. And finally, we communicate, coordinate, and partner with community emergency management partners such as Broward County Sheriff's Office, other fire coalitions. You will see here on the resources, United States Fire Administration, National Council of Fire. There's several different organizations that we've partnered up, and I've taken citations and resources for the creation of this fire safety presentation. Moving on to the next slide. In efforts to try to make this training as focused as possible, it is a long training that we are mandated to take. I wanted to focus on 5 simple objectives for this training, and they all evolve around fire. It's important to understand fire, understand the dangers of fire, and if and when fire begins, we need to act as quick as possible, as fire spreads very, very fast. Learn the different types of fire hazards that exist, what causes fire incidents. Learn the different fire safety equipment available for fire prevention, fire alarms, and understand how fire can be prevented. I think, though this is bullet number 5, I think ultimately the training is to ensure that you understand how serious fires can be, how deadly fire can be, and what we can do to prevent fires. See something, say something. It's very important that we all have this into consideration when trying to understand how we can prevent fires. On the next slide, I've broken down this training into 10 different sections. As I mentioned earlier, this is a long training, and I'm trying to simplify the training in specific sections so that we can break them down and talk about each one independently. If anyone has any questions, I would prefer you raise your hands, and you, once I finish the slide, I would be more than happy to take questions. But preferably, if we can leave them for the very end, I would prefer we do that. Thank you. So on this slide, we have the 10 different sections. The first one being fire facts. I think we all know what fire is, but sometimes learning a little bit of facts regarding fire and school statistics as well, or even just fire statistics overall, kind of brings up the reality and awareness of how deadly fire can truly be. Section number 3 is 911 fire rescue. Section number 4, fire hazards. Section number 5, guide to using safety equipment. Section number 6, gas leaks. Number 7, fire extinguishers. Number 8, fire drills. Number 9, outdoor and wildfire. And number 10, I think most importantly again, is prevention information, resources, brochures, posters, just information that we can post up and that we can share and communicate with all of the public as to the prevention of fire. Moving on to the next slide, slide number 5, we're going to talk about the first section, which is section number 1, fire facts. Fire is fast. There is no time to grab things. You must escape. I personally not have been in a fire where I've had to just pick up and go, but I have seen on TV and have heard that people panic and the first thing they want to do is grab their personal belongings and important belongings. So the tendency would be to do that. But it's important that we stop and we not do that. Our life is most important, and there's nothing personal, no personal effects, no papers, documents that are more important than our livelihood. So it's important that we understand that there's no time to grab things. We must escape quick. Fire is hot. It can easily rise well over 600 degrees in a matter of seconds. And in minutes, it could turn into what we call an entire room turning into flames is called a flashover. And this is what firefighters have to fight. This flashover that just the entire room, and little by little it goes spreading into all the rest of the home or the rest of the building, the rest of the location very, very quickly. Fire is dark. It becomes dark very quickly because of the smoke. The smoke rises. So it's important that we remain in the bottom of the smoke. And we'll talk more about this in the slides, in the forthcoming slides. And unfortunately, the most importantly and the most dreadful is fire is deadly. Smoke and toxic gases kill people more than flames do. That's the reality. It's important that we know the facts so that we can be safer. Here on the top of the title, USFA, which I will be discussing on the next slide, is the United States Fire Administration. And we'll talk more on the U.S. Fire Administration in the next slides. But I did want to bring this up because I liked this slide. When I created this slide, I thought it was interesting. I felt like a child back in kindergarten or in elementary. I think we all learned the importance of fire. And the first things that we learn is stop, drop, and roll. If your clothes catch fire, stop, drop, and roll. Stop, drop to the ground, and cover your face with your hands. Roll over and over your back and forth. Roll over and over or back and forth until the fire is out. This interactive slide reminded me of when I learned these main basic instructions as to if you were exposed to fire. So it's important, again, know the facts so that you can be safer. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the United States Fire Administration develops and delivers fire prevention and safety education programs in partnership with other federal agencies, the fire and emergency response community, the media, and the safety interest groups. We also work with the public. They also work with the public and private groups to promote and improve fire prevention and life safety through research, testing, and evaluation. I was able to, in creating this presentation, I actually didn't even know that this fire administration existed. I was able to learn much about fire prevention, and I did include a lot of resources in this presentation from this administration. And USFA is part of the FEMA governmental agency, and we'll discuss more of that in the next slides. Slide number 9 talks about the National Fire Protection Aid Association, NFPA. And here, I think it's the simple causes of fire. There's many more causes of fire, but these are the basic ones, and these are the ones I'm going to talk about in this presentation, and they're the ones that we're going to train on. Cooking. Here at our schools, our kitchens, cook for our children, for the cafeterias. In Florida, there's not much heating, but I know that there's space heaters under people's desks where I've actually personally experienced electrical issues where they've burned electrical plugs, as well as extension cords can sometimes be deadly when connecting appliances. Smoking is another one that people don't realize can cause fires. People just flick their cigarette to the ground. It could just easily catch on fire, could be left lit by a sofa, could catch on the drapes. And candles. I think candles are becoming more and more popular, and fire related issues because people go out and leave their candles at home, don't understand the issues that can bring leaving a candle lit up, unfortunately. So these are the top 5 causes of fire. In my next slide, I wanted to just quickly go over some of the different categories of fires that I actually didn't know they existed. When you call a firefighter or in the fire academy, they concentrate much on um, these different types of categories, ratings, if you will. And you have, I'll start with the lowest: low, moderate; high, which is blue; very high, yellow; severe would be more of an orange; extreme is more of a color approaching red; and catastrophic is a code red. Here at schools, we always have code reds, and they're always referenced by the red color. So it's important that when we are exposed to a fire, we can relate to that as being an emergency code red. The next slide, we're going to go into our module number 2, our section number 2 of our presentation. And we're going to talk briefly about sometimes people call 911 by mistake. Sometimes people call 911 even for things that are not emergency related. A lot of times, often in schools, that happens. And thousands of fire emergency incidents happen in Broward schools each year. So it's important that when we do call, we truly have an emergency. And obviously, when we call 911, it can either be fire rescue, it could be the police department. It depends on what that emergency is. But the last thing we want to do is make sure that we're not calling 911 and using up that time or that space, if you will, for something that may not be an emergency, when there truly may be an emergency that is needing the attention of those people taking the calls. So inevitably, it is true that thousands of emergencies are called upon from schools daily, yearly, and we do have a lot of emergency situations in schools. I wanted to just kind of highlight this information that I found very interesting for you all to know. In 2014 through 2014 and 18, the U.S. fire departments responded to an estimated average of 3,230 structure fires in schools each year. These fires caused annual averages of 1 civilian death, 39 civilian injuries, and approximately $37 million in direct property damage. That's a lot. Fires that were intentionally set were the leading cause of fires, accounting for almost 2 of every 5 fires. In the upcoming slides, you will see a graph that I've included as part of this presentation, because I thought it was very interesting to see that the majority of the causes of fires were intentional. And in schools, where there's children and the setting of students, we tend to forget that, but uncontrolled or the lack of training or education for these students, particularly for people to understand how important it is not to play with fire, matches, etc., we would probably mitigate some of those fires that took place and that were intentional. School fires most often originated in a lavatory or in a locker room, and mostly by students. And 2/3 of school fires occurred between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. So obviously, these fires were basically within school operation, not necessarily at night or outside of school hours. As I mentioned, here's the chart or the graph that I wanted to bring forward that I thought was very interesting. So I probably would have thought that the major cause in fires, particularly in schools, were cooking. But as you can see from the graph, you had 43% of intentional fires versus 31% of cooking equipment fires. We experience a lot of fires in our kitchens, and as part of the safety precautions that we take with the EHS department, as well as the risk management department and the food and nutrition department, we ensure that our electrical wiring, that are based on state statutes and the federal Department of Education, the Florida Department of Education, and the federal funds that are given to the schools for money funds for cafeteria and food funds, that the equipment be up to date, that there not be old equipment. So there's a lot of regulations around the safety of equipment, appliances in the kitchen. So I was glad to see that it was lower than the highest, but still, I thought 31% was still evidently high, considering all the precautions and state statutes, regulations that evolve around the safety of schools and kitchens. So you will see on 19% was playing with heat source. These are people that are playing with matches, leaving intentionally things on that can, even a microwave can somehow explode and cause a fire. And the least one was heating equipment. Fortunately, we live here in Florida, so we don't have to worry about heaters and other type of gas heating systems that may cause any type of complications as it relates to heating equipment. So I really enjoyed this slide. It was eye-opening for me to see the large amounts of destruction that's taken place on the schools' properties. The next slide, slide number 15, we're going to discuss briefly about 911 and fire rescue. In general, during a school year, 911 is called 1,100 times. So this is per school. As I discussed briefly, sometimes we call 911 for things that are outside of emergencies. And 1,100 times is significantly a lot. This particular 1,100 times were all fire related. So you can imagine that we may have called 911 a lot more than 1,100 times in one school year for one school. That's significant. What do you do when you call 911 or fire rescue? What to do when fire strikes in your school or kitchen and you have hundreds of students and staff in one central location and or eating in the cafeteria, right? One thing is not to say that one fire is less than another, but if, God forbid, I leave the stove on in my house and I'm alone, or I have children in my house and there's a fire, we have to escape. But what do you do when you have hundreds and hundreds of students, even thousands of people in a location? That could become very scary and people can get trapped. And there has been some serious deaths across different parts of the U.S. where I recall one where there were people in a nightclub, and there was a fire and people got caught up. There wasn't enough fire exits. There was more than the amount of people that should have been there, and unfortunately, they died. So, what to do when fire strikes? Well, obviously you have to call 911, and that's what we normally do. I'm going to go on to slide number 18, which we call 911, and in a school setting, normally the most important person you have to reach out to a partner, depending on where you are, is the principal, assistant principals, office manager, whomever's in charge, right? And you got to get the communication out. You got to get people to start evacuating. Notify the school administrator or their designee of the emergency and evacuate. Run. Get out. Fire safety. As I mentioned earlier in section number 1 about fire facts, smoke is dangerous. I think it's important to get low to avoid smoke. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the further slides. Tackle the fire if you're trained to do so, right? We will be, after this training, providing additional more specific training on those identified fire marshals of each zone for the schools. Under the school board members, they're going to have a group of task force, if you will, that are going to be trained. Something, a little bit more than this training that is specific to the fire academy and the fire marshals. Evacuate your place if the fire gets out of control. Don't stop to collect your personal belongings. I mentioned that. I know it's going to be hard. I could imagine myself, and I always think about what would happen if there was a fire. So I have a box under my bed that is always ready, that if I have to go, I have to run, I can just take it with me. If you catch fire, drop and roll on the floor or cover with a blanket and inform authorities of the site. This is a little repetitive, but I just can't overstress how important it is to know these things, because when we panic, everything just goes away and we just go blind. Section number 4 of the 10 that we're going to discuss in this training today is number 4, fire hazards. I hope everyone is enjoying the training and you're understanding the importance of fire. Pay attention, everyone, as this presentation is only going to get more interesting, and you're going to have to take note because there will be a quiz at the end of the presentation. I think that woke up everyone. Thank you. Fire hazard facts. I also thought this was very interesting to know. From 1993 to 1997, electrical fires were the 5th leading cause of all home fires, 4th in fire deaths, and 2nd leading cause of direct property damage. Cords and plugs make up one of the largest segments of electrical fire issues, or fire causes. We're going to go a little bit in depth specifically related to electrical wiring, because I think here at the schools and even at home, these are realistic things, fire hazards that exist in our everyday life. So I wanted to focus and hone in on that. This category covers things such as extension cords, lamps, cords, appliance cords, Christmas wiring. Now, as we approach Christmas, more and more people use extension cords to plug in those inflatable things and those lights outside, and that can definitely cause a fire. In fact, an estimated 13,100 fires in 2001 were specific related to Christmas wiring, with 906 deaths and in excess of 414 million in property damage per year. This is massive. Our next slide, slide number 22, is going to talk about examples of fire hazard incidents. Electrical fires. Wiring is one of the leading causes of fires in the United States. Mind you, in our graph that I presented earlier, for schools, this is one of the least incidents. Remember, the first one was intentional. The next one was on the cooking, and so on and so forth. I believe this was one of the least ones in schools. But related overall, the electrical fires is one of the leading causes of fires in the United States overall. Example of some of the components of structure wiring that contribute to this problem are fixed wiring, switches, lighting fixtures, cords, plugs, lamps, and light bulbs. We have this in our homes, so we're exposed to these hazards every single day. We just need to be educated and know how we can prevent a fire from happening from the use of one of these. Because electrical fires pose such a significant threat for our schools and even our homes, the following National Fire Protection Association recommendations are being provided in an effort to reduce hazards. Never run cords under carpeting. I see that so much when I go into a school. Even at home, people do that so that you don't see how ugly the cord looks. This is very dangerous. Don't pin or trap cords between the walls and furniture. We also do this in classrooms or at home, just wanting to make sure that that cord is stuck to the wall. That's going to cause a fire immediately, or an electrical issue that may cause a fire and burn. These conditions contribute to the likelihood that an overheating cord will cause fire. I don't know if any of you have ever done this, but sometimes a glue gun. My daughter plays with a glue gun a lot, and I'm always after her making sure that she doesn't leave it on. Well, I've seen that, and if you've ever experienced it and you touch the cord of the glue gun, it's burning, super hot. If I were to leave that glue gun burning all night long, potentially that can cause a fire. That can definitely be a huge potential problem in creating a fire in my home. Dispose of frayed or broken cords. Do not fix them with tape or slices. I used to do that all the time, where you would just wrap one of those black electrical wiring tapes. You can't do that. Do not nail, staple, tape, or attach cords in some other fashion directly to walls or over doorways. Never plug in a major appliance or more than one small appliance into an extension cord. I do this all the time. We buy those large extension cords that have like 10 outlets, and you plug in a bunch of things in those outlets. So the more things you can plug into that one extension cord, the happier you are. These practices are overloading and overheating of cords, and they cause fires. Extension cords are not designed as permanent wiring and or for long-term use. And I think this is a great point because we sometimes forget this. We have extension cords and we leave them there for years, and we think that this is the way how we're going to connect the TV that's 25 feet away from the electrical unit, but you want the TV on the other side of the room, and you just leave that cord stationed there for life. And it shouldn't, because it's not permanent wiring and it shouldn't be used, and that is a danger. These are simple things that we do every single day that sometimes we really take for granted how we continue to practice these things. And we've been fortunate enough not to have a serious issue, but they can cause and be very deadly. Other examples of fire hazards, as I mentioned earlier, that I didn't include here, was the glue gun that my daughter uses. But you have utility hazards. You have gas leaks, microwaves. You don't stop to think that the microwave can catch on fire, but if you put something in there and it burns, I've had fire come out of a popcorn bag. Unattended stoves or ovens, space heaters under our desks when we're cold in the office. Matches is another one. And chemicals. Sometimes we have flammable chemicals. We don't realize that they're close to something that not necessarily is on fire, but it's hot enough that if it stays there long enough, it can burn and explode. Signs to look out for. I think we all know smoke, obviously. When you see smoke, a burning smell, a burning sensation, I can walk into a location and I can immediately smell if the house has candles lit, or if they've put air freshener, or if something's burning on the kitchen stove. I have a very good sense of smell, sometimes too much. But it's important that these are signs to look out for, that especially whether in your classroom, in your schools, in your office buildings, in your home, that you pay attention to these signs, to these smells. Sparking equipment. Flames, obviously, and fire. But at that point, it's not preventive. At that point, it's already happening. And what do you have to do? you have to get out. Call 911. Thank you for raising your hand. Child safety. I didn't go too much into child safety because I wanted to make this training more about the adult that is being educated here, the professional that needs to understand the importance. But, you know, us parents, us professionals, teachers, playing with matches is the number one cause of fire deaths for children, for youngsters. Whether they're playing in the backyard trying to light up a campfire with sticks, whether they're camping, whether they're just intrigued by the flame and just are playing with matches in their room or at school. It's important that I thought I highlight this because we all know the dangers of matches, but sometimes the kids can have the matches and we haven't realized that. So store matches and lighters high up where they can't be reached, out of sight, preferably locked in something. Ensure your children are properly educated on fire safety measures, including the stop, drop, and roll. I have adult children and a smaller child, and they all remember learning this in school. And, whether you're at home or whether you're in a location, a business setting, or a school, I think it's important that everyone knows that there's a clear escape plan for emergencies and where they have to exit. I know I may sound repetitive, but it's important that we all know exactly where those exit signs are. We all understand that we have to escape, that we can't just stop and try to pick up our belongings, because in a moment of panic, we all forget what to do. And it's normal. Number 5, section number 5, module number 5 of this training, it's going to go a little bit into safety equipment. I wanted to talk about not only safety equipment as it relates to preventive safety equipment, but also more on, like even how to use equipment when you're in an emergency situation. Guide to using safety equipment. So in this case, there are a series of different types of equipment that can help turn on, off equipment that can help mitigate further fire damage. Obviously, fire alarms are preventive. A hood suppression system, which some of you may or may not know what that is. That's for the kitchen, specific related to cafeterias or restaurants, or even if you may have this in your own home. Power switches, smoke detectors. Now there's even carbon monoxide detectors as I was researching for this presentation, and fire sprinklers. And I don't mean the ones outside in your home. I mean the ones that are inside of your home that trigger when there's fire, and they normally, schools by state statute, by state regulations of educational facilities, which is SREF, mandates for all schools to have fire sprinklers in schools and all areas of the school. So that is an additional protection, both preventive and, God forbid, there is a fire, they should automatically turn on. Pull the fire alarm station. A lot of times we've gone by these types of systems or equipment in hallways. I've seen them in hospitals. God forbid I would even know how to use them, but in panic, I would probably, if they have a glass, break it and pull it down. This is a fire alarm, and in this case for schools, this only activates the school fire alarm, right? Obviously, for the schools, and we'll talk a little bit about this in upcoming slides, fire drills are performed consecutively, and I know that we have more drills related to emergency preparedness, more so now after some of the incidents that have taken place in the last couple of years, like an active shooter assailant. We have a lot of additional trainings that are given. But the fire alarm, this is important. Pull it down. Don't hesitate. Pull it down. Call 911. These type of systems Some of you may or may not be familiar with them. They're more related to the hood suppression systems, where if the kitchen is gas, it would stop it. I have a gas heater at home, a gas water heater, so I'm a little familiar with this. It looks like I have one of these in the gas heater, and you have to know how to use. There's additional instructions related to these types of equipment that can be provided. We normally hand those out, and you can work through the physical plant operation systems, and the custodians get additional training on how to use these, as well as the food and nutrition department, the the supervisors and managers of each school. But nonetheless, I think it's important that I brought it up here. And they're usually located remotely, by a hood or near an exit. So these are things that you should be able to know where they are and be able to um, pull them as mentioned here. Know where it's located ahead of time. Don't wait after the fact to look for it. You should know exactly where they are. So if the fire is under the hood and this suppression system, there's some that are automatically turned on based on the level of heat or exposure. And it should be automatic. And this is what it would actually do to the fire, right? Now, when we move on to the next slide, if it's not turned on, this is what you would run into. This is very dangerous, and this will easily jump in throughout the kitchen and just go down through the walls, under the doors, and the school could easily burn quickly, very quickly. So it's important that if activation is not automatic, that you pull down on that system. I wanted to talk a little bit of hood fire suppression systems, as some of us that may not necessarily work in schools may not be exposed to these types of things. But nonetheless, I think it was important that we understand, um, the different types of suppression agents that exist. And there's also dry chemical systems that are available. And again, the janitors or custodians, there's specific training more related to this. This was more in general a fire safety training that I wanted to be able to present, and also not only specific to schools, but more try to generalize it. So I included a lot of additional information that goes outside of a school setting. Slide number 34 continues is, so we in our schools here in Broward, we have these CO2 systems. They produce a white cloud, like a white vapor. And we don't have, Broward school systems are not flooding systems. In some of the newer schools, we have the newer UL 300 system, which is like a wet system that automatically wets everything in the cafeteria. And it's like with an EpiPen. If you use your EpiPen, you need to call 911 and go to the hospital. Well, this is if any fire suppression system is activated, even if you have the fire under control and you feel that everything is perfect, you still have to call 911. The fire department has to get in. It's so important. They have to do their things. It has to be reported. There's a series of additional documents and papers that have to be filled out. But again, 911, evacuate immediately, notify the principal and or your food and nutrition area supervisor or designee. And eventually we have to call in a work order with our physical plant operation system, because they may have to send over some teams to go ahead and clean and pick up. And, it has to be a little bit more than just having the janitors sweep up any of the residue, etc. There may have to be some professionals to be called in to pick up some of the additional residue, and everything has to be cleaned, because this is an area that has to be sterilized, etc. for the cooking of the children. The kitchen needs to have a lot of regulations that have to be followed from the health department. So a thorough cleaning of the kitchen must be completed once the emergency is over. And really, how extensive the cleaning depends on the type of extinguishing system that was used. And we'll learn more about those systems in the upcoming slides where I talk about fire extinguishers and the different types of fire extinguishers. Dry chemical is the most difficult to clean. So obviously we would have to send over people from our physical plant operations department and we may have to even hire a group of specific people to come in with those garments and all those gears to be able to clean afterwards. And as I mentioned, the health department must be called for an inspection before using the kitchen again. These inspections have to be up to date. Our kitchens are federally funded by the federal government as well as state funded. So if we don't have our kitchens up to par, especially after having reported a fire, funding may be eliminated, and this would be detrimental because we won't be able to provide food to some of those low-income families that we so much are able to support and help them for their children to learn and to be able to have healthy foods. Avoid clothes dryer fires. When I saw this this photo, it was interesting. I used to have a clothes dryer like that. For a minute there, I wasn't sure. It looked like an oven, but it is a clothes dryer fire. And I've experienced something very similar. Didn't get like that, but sometimes we don't realize the things that we put in, or even the things that are in the pockets of the pants or the clothes that we throw into these dryers. And they can definitely cause a fire. And again, super dangerous. This can just grab your comforter that you were washing, and it could just move quickly, and the house or the garage can go on fire. Again, you need to act quick. Clean the lint from the vent and from behind the dryer often. This can also cause to that effect. Be aware, fire can happen anywhere. Slide number 38, we're going to talk briefly about gas leaks. For us, we have a lot of systems, in the school, in the case of the transportation department, that have flammable liquids, in our physical plant operations as well, under risk management and EHS department. So flammable gas requires immediate attention, and I would probably say more so professional immediate attention. Even in my own home that I have a gas heater, if I immediately smell gas, you're supposed to call that number and they come out like in seconds and minutes, because gas can also kill you, even if it doesn't turn into fire. So 911, call for help. They will know exactly who to call for specific gas leaks. Evacuate the kitchen and building occupants. The school facilities emergency evacuation plan may need to be modified to keep students and staff from gas installations located at the schools. With the newer schools, we've made a lot of changes, and I would say that we've really eliminated some of the locations of where gas is. There are some schools that still have these gas, and they're mandated because they might be next to a city, a county where their gas unit is located next to or close to one of our schools. So we do work with our county to ensure that these gas equipment are up to date and that there's no potential risk to students or even exposure, if any. But I did want to bring this up because we are exposed to it, and we can have gas leaks at home. We can have gas leaks anywhere. And it's important to know the smell of gas. Notify the school principal, designee, or front office of the gas leak. We have our system compass operator, and here's the number. These gas equipments all have this information as a sticker on it. But again, you're not going to stop to look for the number. You have to call 911. You're not going to stop to try to see that you call the correct phone on the sticker of the equipment when there could be potentially an explosion. It's important that you understand that when there's potential danger, you have to act quick. And then eventually you can re-enter the building upon the approval of the fire department. They're the professionals. They're the trained experts that are going to guide us to ensuring that we can return, we can do the right things to come back to safety. Slide 42 just talks about whether you had a potential threat of a fire, or there was a spark and we evacuated the school. Once that emergency is over, or once everyone has evacuated and now there were no fatalities and there were no injuries and everything looks like we can go back to normal, it's important that we do call Compass. We're going to be given a fire order, a fire work order. This is reported to the county. We track these. We actually report to the Department of Education how many incidents we had yearly. So we track and monitor these to make sure that there are no safety concerns in our schools and our district locations, anywhere that might have posed harm for not only our students but our staff. If the issues were in the kitchen, obviously the Food and Nutrition Services Area Supervisor, Designee, and Principal need to be notified. And as always, we can't enter the building, we can't return until the fire department has given that approval. And they're there on site, and they will provide us with that approval when they feel that it is definitely appropriate to return. I want to move on to section number 7. I know this is a long presentation and I made note of that earlier, but this is, I think, probably one of the things where I learned the most from the presentation: fire extinguishers. I really didn't even know there were a significant amount of different types of fire extinguishers. But as I did my research, I did understand that there's a few different types. Probably I've seen some behind glass, cases. And I stop and I walk by them. I say, I wonder if, God forbid, I'm in an emergency, how would I even use this? Or even, when you're panicking, you can't stop to read instructions. So this is a 40 BC fire extinguisher, and there's different types of dry chemical extinguishers. Class B, it's more for flammable liquids. Class C, energized electrical equipment. Each kitchen is required to have at least one portable fire extinguisher dry chemical. Kitchens with dry chemicals and CO2 will have the 40 BC fire extinguisher. Schools equipped with the UL 300 wet system will have a Class C extinguisher. That Class C extinguisher is it's this one. It's the next one on the slide. You see it's a little different. When you use it, foam comes out of it. It's like wet chemicals. And again, this is a school cafeteria kitchen that you can see. These are the ones that we use specifically in the kitchens. How to use an extinguisher. I think this is key right here. Pass step 1. Pull the pin. Many fire extinguishers have a pin near the handle at the top. Begin by removing that. That's like the first thing. Remove the pin from whichever model or type you have. Aim the nozzle, horse, or hose. Pass step number 3 is squeeze the handle. And pass step number 4 is sweep from side to side at the base of the fire. Right? I know that I wish I had a fire extinguisher here that I can visually show you. It's not as complicated as one thinks, because it has all those tags, because those tags need to be ensured that they're up to date, code is up to date, and they're not expired, etc. But it's not as difficult as one may think it is with these 4 simple steps that I've provided here. Through the training that's given to the custodians and janitors, they do have the live fire extinguisher here for you to actually practice with. Since this is a virtual training, I can't provide this for you now. Fire drills. I remember doing fire drills, a lot of fire drills in schools. I can tell you that I don't probably recall having done a fire drill as an adult in an office building, but I think the awareness is becoming more apparent nowadays that fire drills have to be done. They're not limited to schools. Fire drills used to be only for schools. I think more and more people are doing fire drills. And though fire drills are mandated for educational sites per section 1006.07 FAB Florida statute, fire drills can also be found in the Florida Fire Preventive Code 69A-60. So in our case, we have 18 drills each year, 2 drills in August and 2 drills per month thereafter. 7 are fire emergency egress drills, 2 are for severe weather, and 9 are active assailant drills. We continue to improve our security training as well, where we have security campus monitors and security resource officers in the schools that are also trained on fire safety. They have a more specific fire safety training. This is more generalized for our population. But as we begin to expect our experts to protect us from fire and from emergencies, we require them to have trainings and certifications as well. And I'm glad to report that all the district schools in Broward County are compliant with the prescribed drill schedules that is year to date. These are mandated, and we track and measure and monitor that these drills are actually taking place. Sometimes we don't do drills at home. I wanted to include this interactive slide here because we may not have a smoke detector or a smoke alarm or a fire alarm, but we can practice this even if we don't have them. And the reason why we would be on the floor is because you would assume that if, God forbid, there's a fire, the fumes are up, the smoke is up, and you can only crawl out. So I would suggest and invite people to practice at home this after having conducted the research to create this presentation for this training. I did practice this with my children, and they actually thought it was very funny. They didn't understand the significance and importance of actually conducting this fire drill at home, but it may serve them the purpose of at least, if any, to remind them what they have to do. God forbid there is a fire at home. Slide 51 is going to go into our 9th topic from the 10 that we have. Is outdoor and wildfire. I added this section to the presentation even though sometimes we don't consider outdoor and wildfires to happen in our state. Normally, states where we've seen fires be catastrophic, as in California or other locations here in Florida, that's not common. But we do have parks and playgrounds, and we have picnics and stuff of this nature, and we are outdoor. So in this case, this can be served for purpose of schools, parks, recreational areas that we might have in our school district sites, as well as home. So place your grill at least 3 feet from siding, deck, railings, leaves, and overhanging branches. I can tell you that my barbecue used to be against the wall of my fence. I've since then moved that and made sure that we've have nothing around it. So I like this slide, and I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to share it as part of the training. It's important that we protect ourselves from smoke, right? We normally don't have wildfires, but I'm talking about smoke not only from a wildfire, but a smoke that can be brought upon by any of the other hazards that we mentioned in the training earlier. When wildfires create smoky conditions, it's important for everyone to reduce their exposure to smoke. I live in Miami Lakes, and I can tell you that sometimes by the west side of the I-75 or by Miramar, potentially the Everglades, I smell a lot of smoke, and there's been mornings that I've woken up and I've seen that it's very cloggy, very foggy, and I can smell the ashes from the smoke and the wind. So, and I'm asthmatic, so that immediately triggers my asthma. So I could relate to this. The smoke irritates your eyes, nose, throat, and lungs. It can make it hard to breathe and make you cough or even wheeze. So children, pregnant women, and people with asthma, as myself, or COPD, heart disease, need to be especially careful about breathing wildfire smoke or any smoke for that matter, which is why you have to keep smoke outside, get out of the sight of smoke, get out. Choose a room where you can close off from outside air, and you can set up a portable air cleaner or filter to keep the air in this room clean, even if it's smoky in the rest of the building and outdoor. And I did that one time when we had those ashes and that fire outside in the whole environment, and I was able to stay in that room, and that room was kept as purified with the air as possible. Reduce your exposure to smoke. Nowadays, with our COVID, we have access to respirators, masks. Uh, I've I've actually benefited from the use of these masks that we have to use based on COVID. Um, Now mandating to have masks because it ensures that these particles, whether it be smoke, whether it be anything on my asthma, not affect me. So, we can wear a respirator. And again, if you have heart or lung disease, it's important that we not be exposed to smoke. Avoid using candles, gas, propane, wood burning stoves, fireplaces, and aerosol sprays that don't fry or broil meat. Smoke tobacco products or vacuum cleaners. All these things um, can contribute to worsen the smoke. We normally have central air conditioning systems, so we're now in schools looking to change these filters that can help us ensure that these fine particles of smoke are not transmitted through our air conditioning systems. Pets and other animals can also be affected by fires or wildfire too. So it's important that we keep track of the fires, or in this case, be aware of power hazard lines. Fallen lines from FP&L can also cause an explosion fire that can then forth bring smoke. Um, Outdoor, as I was talking earlier, we normally, at least not in my household, have fire pits or wood piles but we do have a gas barbecue, and the propane tank needs to be 5 to 30 feet away from the home. These are just safety tips that I thought was important to highlight as part of this training, because we all know these things, but rarely do we do them. I can tell you from my personal experience, having researched this for the creation of this training, that I knew these things, but I don't really practice them. And I thought it would be important that I highlighted them, because you may remember, God forbid, you're in a situation, and you can refer always back to this presentation and training. Don't start a campfire or burn yard debris if there are high winds, drought, or high temperatures. Slide 58 talks about cigarettes. We talked earlier about the cigarettes. Don't throw cigarettes where they can easily catch fire, into bushes, plotted plants, or landscaping, peat moss, dried grasses, or mulch. Keep cigarettes, lighters, matches, and other smoking materials up high out of the reach of children in a locked cabinet. This goes for, there's state statute also where smoking is not permitted within school areas, but even district offices, it's still not permitted. So make sure that anything that you do related to smoking is far away from the school. Practice this at home as well, and quit smoking. And our last and final module section is preventive information. I wanted to just kind of bring to light some posters, brochures that you can post in the office, and who's our trained personnel. We also have a training on first aid personnel, as well as CPR, AED. We have an AED machine equipment also located next to the extinguisher. I think this is important to have, so when you do have to call 911 for fire, police, or rescue, you know exactly, and even the poison control. This number is very handy. Procedures. This I recommend this to be put in all of locations that is easily accessible to be read. 911 when in doubt. Fire safety checklist for the workplace. I thought this was interesting. Please place these in special locations. We will provide instructions on where to put them in your schools or locations. And if anything, it's important that we stop to notify emergencies. Sometimes we might think that things that we saw wasn't a necessary emergency, but if you walk by a power cord and you might smell that it's burning, stop and do something. Don't forget to notify the school administrator or their designee of any emergency or potential hazard or anything that might lead to an emergency. It's important. Please see something, say something. And I wanted to share with you, you can write these, take these down, take a picture of it. These are some of the resources and citations as to where I took the information for this presentation. The National Fire Protection Association, the NFPA, the United States Fire Administration, part of FEMA, our government, USFA, Safeopedia, National Safety Council, the NSC, OSHA, and the Red Cross Home Fire Safety. These were the ones that I used for this presentation. Again, there's a lot of information, education, training available online. There's a huge, vast fountain of information, specific related for schools as well. We'll be providing some of that additional information that you can take and print at your school and post. But I think this was the information that I thought would be best beneficial for this audience. I wanted to thank you all today for being patient, at least for not asking questions. I am going to leave the floor open for any questions, for any concerns, comments, feedback. As I mentioned earlier, there will